We've had some audio problems with the streaming service again. So what I'm going to do is back this up and go through it again for you really quickly. I apologize. Again, today, we're going to talk about building your career, and the content we're going to address today are frequently asked questions. We're not going to go into the questions, but everything I tell you today is based on questions that I get asked about all the time. So I hope that you'll kind of stay with us. We'll move through this fairly quickly. It's not a long presentation today, but I think it's an important one. You know, we're facing some really unstable economic times. We'll probably have some tariffs. The tariffs will affect prices. We may have a little increase in inflation. We may have some job layoffs. Already 20,000 people have accepted the buyouts from the federal government. So I hate to say this, although they have an 8-month severance, you now have 20,000 people, if you're in the Northeast, that you got to compete with. And that's pretty tough. We're adding more people to an already overcrowded job market. When I say overcrowded, there are more people in the management executive levels looking for jobs than there are people who have jobs or have jobs to offer. So these tough economic conditions, particularly for people who are trying to take care of their families and have a decent life, and when they get intertwined with social factors, you can push governments and push people to the edge, and in worst cases, spark civil unrest. And we've seen that around the world and when countries experience that. So really, as a country now, we're going through an amazing amount of tipping. We have tipping points. And there was a great book written about that. And we have geopolitical tipping points. We have domestic tipping points. We have political tipping points. We have budget deficit tipping points. We have social issue tipping points, et cetera. We have all of these things that are coming together. And any number of them could create really adverse economic conditions and affect workforce and affect employment and affect the difference, how long it takes you to find a job. Now, you know, these issues are real, and you can't just ignore them thinking they don't apply to you, because they probably will sometimes over the next 2 or 3 years. And in some of these are going to be politically related. Some of these are going to be stuff that's just been in the pipeline for a long time, and it's going to come to the point we have to deal with it. You know, I heard this when I was at East Texas State University studying journalism and taking economic history, that the first lesson of economics is scarcity. So there's never enough of everything, and never enough of anything to satisfy all those who want what you have. And the first lesson of politics, conversely, is to disregard the first lesson of economics, which is probably one reason why we continue to operate in large deficits. Most countries that want to create a sovereign wealth fund, like the president does, they take the funding for that fund from surpluses in their budget. We haven't had surpluses in the budget since the Clinton years, and some people would argue that was just clever bookwork. Okay, so whatever, it may not have been, but that's the last time we had a recorded budget surplus. So these things, the deficit, if the interest rate goes up, is going to impose a hardship on people, on businesses, and on the economy. And, you know, the deficit is a significant issue, but there's also a larger issue that's a tipping point that nobody pays any attention to, and it's called unfunded liabilities. In other words, when a municipality has promised a lot of benefits to their police and fire unions or teaching unions or whoever else, and then they've lost money in their investments, or they've not been good stewards, and they don't have enough money to pay out all of the retirement payments they've committed to, that's called an unfunded liability. Now, there are very few people have missed a retirement payment because governments borrow and to fill up the coffers to be sure they're current on all their immediate opportunities or immediate liabilities. But unfunded, you're looking at Medicare, Medicaid, military dependent benefits, military retirement benefits. That's over $100 trillion. Now, the tipping point is, listen to this. If you started spending $1 million a day the first day Jesus of Nazareth was on this earth through tonight at midnight, you would have not spent $1 trillion. Okay, think about that. All those years, spending $1 million a day through tonight at midnight, and you would not have spent $1 trillion. That's how significant the problem is we keep kicking down the road. Now, I'm not talking about politics and I'm not making judgments. I'm just saying this is a tipping point, and at some point it may affect your livelihood. It may affect your retirement plans. And so you need to absolutely start thinking about what are my options and how am I going to respond? Let's talk about your job search. I know a lot of you are angry and you're frustrated, and I feel for you. Somebody said, gosh, you don't get a lot of live people watching. And I said, no, I don't, because we're just getting started and trying to build things up. And they said, God, doesn't that depress you? And I said, I'm not worried about my success. I'm worried about the success of the people I'm trying to help. And I think if I keep focusing on that, that's probably the best way to do it and not get depressed over how tough this is to build this business. I've always been successful my entire life, whether I was working for my father or delivering newspapers or working for newspapers on the weekends or anything else. I've always made money and been able to pay my bills. And now I'm retired. I have a retirement plan. It's active now, but I want to make this business successful because I have a wonderful CFO in the next room who keeps reminding me that I'm not making enough money to cover my operating expenses. So we continue to push forward. We continue to stay focused on the goal, which is to help you find a better job. And that's why we've gone to the membership program and are trying to make it accessible, affordable, and give you the kind of help you need. But now let's focus on what a lot of people want. A lot of people want a magic bullet. They want to be able to find a job without having to do a lot of stuff they don't want to do, they don't like doing. And let me just disabuse you of that notion. That doesn't exist. Does not exist. So please try to break with that illusion right now. You've got to be able to manage your frustration and anger. The old expression is, you just can't beat City Hall. The opposite is one person can't stop the force of government from affecting you. And there's a lot of truth to that. But the other side of this is that you can't beat an automated computer with AI, automation, and intelligence. So you can't control that. So don't let that upset you. Know how to deal with it. And I will tell you today, to be successful, there's no silver bullet. There's no magic bullet. You have to have a plan. You have to have a plan. You have to be able to have a strategy and discipline to get it done. Mel Robbins, who's a favorite author and podcaster of mine, who's just a delight. I mean, she's just full of energy. She's gone through some unbelievably tough times in her own life. She was a lawyer, and things didn't work out the way she thought they would do, and was really in debt, and didn't know how she was going to work her way out of it. And she came up with this concept of a 5-second rule because it was just so hard for her to get out of bed every day to face the pressures of not being able to pay your bills. And if you've ever started a company on your own, and this is the first time I've actually had an income while I was doing it, but it can be scary as hell. And you feel the weight of the world can just crush your shoulders. Why? Because no one's coming for you. You either make this successful or it's a failure. Well, let me tell you this, and I don't want this to be a downer, because I think there's huge opportunity in this, but no one is coming for you. If you understand that and you embrace that and you just burrow it into your mind and your heart, then you can use that as the motivation to out-hustle those people that you're competing with who are waiting for somebody to come rescue them. So that's an advantage for you if you will only do it, if you will only take action. So she says, follow the 5-second rule. There's something you don't want to do. Oh, I don't want to sit in there and make networking calls. What can I do? Gosh, Jim wants to go play golf. It's such a beautiful day. 5 seconds. If you don't start doing something you need to do, must do within that 5 seconds, you probably will not do it. Try that and see if that will improve your performance. I said before we discovered the audio problem that I get up early to go to the gym. And I used to be a night person when I was a crime writer and investigative journalist for the Post in Houston. But now I get up early to go to the gym so that I don't, by the time I reach old age, which is right around the corner, that I'm not going to be so stiff and immobile that I don't have much of a life. So I go and I'm there usually about 4:30. But some mornings when it's cold, my wife loves to sleep with the window open. It's so difficult to get out of bed, and I use the 5-second rule. I know that if my legs aren't swinging out from underneath those warm, wonderful covers in 5 seconds, I probably won't get up and go. And I think you need to apply that rule to your work on networking. People always want me to talk about networking, and I say, well, what do you feel about it? Well, I hate it. I don't like doing it, but can you teach me how to do it? And what they're really saying is, show me a shortcut so I won't have to do the things I don't want to do. And that doesn't exist. Oh, yeah, it does. It's called ineffective networking, and probably won't help you find that job you want to find and you need to find. No one is coming for you. You must take action every day. Follow the 5-second rule. Okay, that's really important because it's very difficult. And when I started in executive roles after I left the Post, when they laid people off, and that didn't happen a lot back then, but when they did lay people off, or if somebody didn't work out or whatever, and they got the sack, there were outplacement firms, and a lot of those firms had big offices. In one corner of the office, there were all of these cubicles, and the cubicles were assigned to clients where they had a phone, they had a distinct number, they had an answering system, they had a pool of executive assistants to make the copier work, to be sure that all the resumes got typed, because there weren't any word processors back then, and people didn't have cell phones very much, and so if they did, they were kind of clunky and not as effective as they are today. And back then, now we have the office with us, we carry it everywhere we go. Back then, the phones, were really kind of got sexy when they became flip phones, but they didn't have the full capability that a Google phone or an Android system or an Apple system has today. So, so you really needed to have that place to go. And a lot of people became reliant on that place. And we always laugh, the recruiters, we used to call those cubicle areas where all the people who've been looking for a job and who were still angry about what happened. We call it the BMW pit, the bitch, moan, and whine pit. But sometimes that's good. You need to get that out of your system, because being angry and frustrated and feeling hard done by does not help you find a job. Now you work from home, and all of those relationships you had at work that people you had lunch with, you had coffee with, people that you might have socialized with, suddenly you find people not returning your calls, people cut off because, gosh, you don't work there anymore. So you must be somehow infectious with this incredibly, dangerous disease they don't want any part of. So you start finding there are barriers to maintain relationships. And so you kind of feel like you're getting isolated, and you begin to feel a little bit lonely, and you begin to feel more frustrated and more angry. These are all common emotions. And one of the reasons we created the membership program is so that we could help you and provide an ongoing resource for you to be able to, get in touch with us. If you're having one of those, my friend of mine, Dr. Terry Satterwhite, the late Dr. Satterwhite, who was a brilliant infectious disease doctor at Medical Center in Houston at Herman Memorial. He's from North Carolina. He said that, Terry, how you doing today? And he'd say, I'm lower than hammered whale shit. Sort of pardon the language, but that was his response when he was really down. Well, when you're feeling that low, and it's part of our membership program, you get 4 30-minute check-in calls every month. So we're here to lift you up. We're here to answer your questions. We're here to show you how you're maybe making a mistake, give you some quick advice to get ready for an interview. If you need to schedule a mock interview, you can buy that from us now at a 40% discount, over what some other people are paying. And can be an hour and a half, 2 hour part of my time. So it's not an expensive part, but it's not inexpensive. And I don't charge as much as some of the high-end executive coaches charge, which are $200, $300, $400 an hour. Not here. So anyway, that's another benefit we have, because you do get lonely, and you do get frustrated, and sometimes you need somebody who will lift you up. So let's talk about career planning, because that's really the heart and soul of success in it. And people don't do it. And everybody says, well, there's a Harvard study or a Yale study or a Princeton study or whatever it was that said that, people who had a career plan were more successful. Well, That a lot of that was a myth. There wasn't a study done by Yale or Harvard. Nobody could ever find it. Now, I routinely ask people as I was interviewing them for those 27 years, do you have a written career plan? I was kind of starting new in search, and so that kind of fascinated me, and I read that a lot of people didn't have it, so I started asking people, do you have a career plan? And what I found was almost every time somebody said, yes, I have a plan, excuse me, and I'd say, well, how are you doing? They said, I'm pretty much on target. I had a couple of, went through the recession and I had a detour, but I had thought that might happen. So I had options that I was working on to find employment so I would not be out of work too long. And that's the benefit of a plan. So you got to plan for your future, and you got to plan for your current job search. If you don't have a written plan for your current job search, more than likely that's going to cause you to prolong the search because you don't have any metrics to hold yourself accountable. And people say, God, you got to have metrics for a job. Absolutely. Because if you're not saying, if I'm not making X number of networking calls a day, if I'm not connecting with the right kind of people on LinkedIn, if I'm not being sure that, and we call it feeding and weeding your garden, feeding and weeding your network. If it's not focused on where I want to go next, that network really can't be of help to you. So you need to start tuning it to be sure it's aligned with your career plan. That's called networking 3.0. And again, it's having a plan. You have to execute on the things that you must do, not the things that you want to do. I had a client, just a wonderful human being, and he liked to play golf, and he didn't like to network, and he didn't like to talk to people and make cold calls to people he didn't know. And so he was always looking for a reason not to do those things that he didn't want to do. So one week we had an end of the week kind of catch-up call, and I said, well, tell me, how did Monday go? Well, Monday was pretty productive. I spent most of the day in the office, and I connected with 4 or 5 people on LinkedIn and blah, blah, blah. And he didn't have a plan, wouldn't do a plan, so the networking connections may or may not have been aligned with where he was trying to go. And then I said, well, tell me about Tuesday. Well, Tuesday I didn't feel very good, so I was kind of frustrated and down in the dumps because I hadn't got anybody calling me back. And, I kept thinking, well, to get people to call you back every day, you probably have to make a lot of outbound calls to get a few calls back every day. So he wasn't meeting, he didn't have any metrics for outbound calls to talk to people that would help him. He would talk to his friends that he was comfortable talking with, but none of them were in a position to help him find a job. So he said, I took the time off and took a mental health day and played a round of golf with my neighbor Tuesday afternoon. I said, oh, that's great. How about Wednesday? Well, Wednesday it rained, so I stayed here and worked in the office, and I connected with a couple of people. Still hadn't worked on his career plan. Still, when we practice his value brand statement, which is the answer to tell me about yourself, he was still acting like it was the first time we had ever talked about it. So he really wasn't doing the things he needed to do to get ready for a job interview, although nothing was in the pipeline. And then he said, so after about 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, he said, I just called it quits and ran errands. I said, well, what about Thursday? Oh, Thursday was great. Was in the office, did a lot of reading, catching up on what's going on. Then I went to have lunch with my old friends at the country club, and we played a round of golf. Now, golf takes about 4 hours. Playing golf 2 times a week is about 8 hours a work day. Okay. And I said, well, tell me about Friday. Well, Friday I had to run some errands to run, and my wife needed me to drop her off at a thing, and I was promised her I'd do some other things. I said, well, what about Friday afternoon? Well, I take Friday afternoons off because it's just nothing's happening. And I said, okay, let me get this, and I repeated his schedule. And I said, so actually you kind of put maybe 2.5 or 3 days of kind of halving it, half-assed work on your search. And he had 8 hours, a full day on the golf course. That won't get it. That won't get it. And what frustrated me was he was such a talented guy. He enjoyed leadership. He enjoyed his employees. He enjoyed being successful in the business he ran until there was an issue and he and the board got crosswise. But he did not want to do the things he needed to do to continue his career successfully. And so he did the things, he did some things he needed to do, but most of the things he did were the things that made him comfortable. You're not going to succeed if you stay in your comfort zone. Okay. You've got to learn how to develop accountability metrics every day. What am I going to do today? I'm going to try to have 20 outbound calls based on things I've read in the newspaper, things I've said. If you're a healthcare guy, there's something called Becker's, and I think they cover several industries. It's in industry news, people who've lost their jobs, people who are getting new jobs. And, and it takes time to build those networks. And it's a lot of research. And somebody said, well, how do you do the research? And I said, well, first of all, where do you want to work? What's your target geography? Where do you want to be geographically? Well, I don't know. I said, well, tell me the organizations that you would like to work for, the companies that you admire, that you might be able to get a senior position with and then move up maybe to a CEO one day. Well, there's some good, and he named his industry, some of the deals. I said, well, what are you doing to build networks inside those companies? Oh, I hadn't thought of that. And so the problem is, if you don't have a plan and it's all up here, you have no accountability to yourself or to your family. And that's not great. I know a recruiter that will ask the candidates who've been out of work for 6 or 8 months. Now, old days, 4 to 6 months, most people could get a job. Not anymore. And especially with the white collar recession, it's 8 to 14 months or maybe longer if you're really not really pounding the pavement to really build the networks to get the interviews so you can get the job. And, so this is just a different time. You've got to have the metrics to force yourself to get the things done that you must do in order to succeed. This recruiter would ask people who've been out of work more than 6 months, well, why do you think it's taken so long to get back into the swing of things? Well, it's just really competitive, and there's just the recruiters aren't doing as much work, and I'm not getting any calls. The implication was he was sitting at home waiting for somebody to call him. And this recruiter, we were talking over coffee one day at before they closed the wonderful Starbucks at Highland Park Shopping Center in Dallas, which was just an incredible community coffee shop. And we were talking, and he said, I'm really nervous about taking somebody who's been out of work 6 or 8 months, who's really just kind of trying to do a job search using the old technology, the old mindset. He said, I'm supposed to recommend them to be a CEO for a moving and grooving company. He said, gosh, that's not a very good, testament to what kind of leader they are, whether they'll do the hard things that they need to do to be successful. So you need to be mindful. If you're going to ask somebody to entrust you to run their organization, and you're not even running your job search very carefully or very successfully, that can come back to haunt you. So every day, do the things you must do, not what you want to do, but you must do. Leverage your resources, your contacts, and events, and broaden the base so that you're not calling the same people over and over again. And remember, networking is not just about helping yourself. Networking is about helping the other person too. So let's now talk about the circle of success. First of all, if you don't have a written career plan, you are shooting yourself in the foot. Okay, I'm absolutely adamant about that. And people who do career coaching with me, they may not do it, but I keep harping about it. It's so important because a career plan will plot your path forward. The famous New York catcher of the 50s and 60s, Yogi Berra, once said that, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else, and you probably won't like it. Well, that's true. It's just like if you depend on somebody else to tell your story, the story they tell other people, you probably won't recognize or won't be happy they're saying there's certain things. So you have to take control, and you have to have a plan. I want to do this. I want to do it in this geography, and these are my 10 or 12 or 15 target companies, or my target hospitals, or my target not-for-profits, or whatever it is, my target manufacturing companies. And you're building relationships within those companies to get information that'll help you respond ahead of the market. And if you don't do that, it's extremely difficult to be successful. And so, you have to have that written plan with metrics, specific geography, specific targets, and measure yourself how you're executing. Now, one of the most common things I hear about career writing down a plan or having a written career plan, well, it's just going to change. Okay, let me ask you a question. If you're the CEO of a $200 million business and your board member says, well, tell us about your business strategy, business plan. Oh, well, we don't have one because it's just going to change. How long do you think you'd last? If you tell a board chairman, no, you don't have a career plan, you don't have a written strategy for your plan and how you're going to move forward, you're basically saying that's an essential thing for you to do, but not for me to do. So don't make that mistake. Get a plan. If you're struggling on how to do it or if you've done one in business, you can probably do one for yourself. But if you have problems with it, we can guide you through the process. Now, when you have a plan with specific targets and specific strategies with specific geography, identified, okay, then you're now approaching networking, and it's called 3.0. Networking in the past was, you connected with people that you thought could help you, but they may not, as you grow in your career, the people that you connected with 5 years ago may not be in the same vertical to help you grow, help you succeed. So you're constantly revising your networking and staying focused. And that's really important. We're going to talk about that a little more in detail in just a minute. And then next, you have to build relationships. Connections on LinkedIn are great, but they are not going to help you necessarily refer you to a job. It's like this. You've been looking for a job for 6 months or so, and you're kind of gaining some weight. You're out in the backyard with a holey t-shirt and shorts with some black socks and sneakers on, mowing your yard. And suddenly the new neighbor who moves in, waves at you. He's in the backyard. They've just moved in. And so you shut off the mower and go over and shake his hand and say, oh, I'm so-and-so. And he says, yeah, what do you do? He said, well, I'm an executive recruiter. Hey, can you find me a job? The recruiter doesn't even know him. This guy worked for one of the big name, world global firms. And, suddenly this guy he doesn't even know, in a holey t-shirt with red sloppy shorts and black socks on with his t-shirts mowing his lawn, is asking him to, hey, could you find me a job? He doesn't know you, and he's not very impressed with the first blush. And you're going to have to build a relationship before you can expect somebody to embrace you and help you. Now, maybe that's not a great example, but let me tell you something. One of the getting a network, it's got to be targeted, and we'll talk about why in just a minute. But you also then, once you have the network, what the hell are you doing to build the relationship? Contacts don't help you very much. Relationships help you. And that takes time, and it takes every day effort, every week effort. Networking is not something you do because you think that they're going to do a layoff and you better get ready for the market. No, you've already waited too late. So you have build relationships, and then you go through and start using those relationships, leveraging those relationships to produce conversion. A new business, a new sales, new job, whatever it is. You may not be looking for a job. You may be looking to expand your business, or you may be looking to add more business for your employer so that you can gain more bonus and gain more prestige, or all the other things that come from being successful. So that's why you network. Even when you're not looking for a job, networking can help you thrive as an executive. Okay, so execution is really important. So let's go through this really quickly. And if you're just joining us, we're running a little bit over tonight because we had an audio problem. Every time we think everything's been solved, and then we have one more issue. So that will not happen again if it hair-lips the Holy Father. Okay, execution is critical. You got to have a career plan. And you approach this as being the CEO of you. You are responsible for your business, your company, and you're a company. And your plan needs to be built around your mission, your vision, and your values. What do you want to accomplish? Where do you want to be when you retire? What do you want people to be saying about how you were to do business with, how you treated other people? Your ultimate goal as of today is what? What do you want to do? Well, it's going to change. Well, yeah, GE's plan has changed like hell over the last several years, but they keep adapting and keep changing their plan to reflect where they're going. And so I would say this to you, that, yes, is it going to, is it your plan going to change? Absolutely. Life changes, You just have to adapt. You have to adapt or you're going to die. That means it may not be physical death, but it may probably mean you're on the sidelines and maybe even a reluctant retirement. So you want to have your ultimate values go, and then you want to reverse engineer from that. So what do I have to do? I want to be the CEO of a Fortune 100 company. What am I going to have to do to reach that? What degrees will I need? What additional certifications will I need? And back it all down. Now, here I am. I've got all this information, all these performance points that I need to address. How do I go about doing that? You go after jobs that'll help you fulfill those steps in your plan. Now, you may get to a point in your career going, oh God, I don't want to do this. The business is changing. The industry's had new technology and it's all consolidating. It's not what I want to do anymore. Great. Don't pursue something you don't want to do and it's going to make you unhappy. Now what you do, you shift, you pivot, and you go in a different direction, but you revise your plan and you start revising your network to support that plan. That's why a career plan, to say I don't need a career plan because it's going to change, is probably one of the lamest excuses I've ever seen. Don't let yourself fall into that category. Don't let yourself be sitting in front of a board chairman and say, well, I don't have a career plan. I'm just going to depend on luck. Okay, networking 3.0. Additionally, it must be connected to your career plan, so it has to align with that. But something else you need to be aware of, there's something called the Dunbar rule. If you're going to try to build relationships, you can only do that with about 135 to 150, according to research from British anthropologist Robin Dunbar. I think he is at Oxford. That may not be correct, but he's a brilliant academic, and this is pretty good study. And what he determined was, studying animals and watching humans, that any group that was bigger than that, you simply could not maintain. You could not maintain and build relationships. I have a lot of contacts because I've been on LinkedIn since before God was around. The company started in May 2003. I joined in January 2004, so I was one of the first 10,000 members. And I have 16,000 followers and connections. But my goal was not to find a job. My goal was to, sell books and sell, business to other people. So that's why my number is so much bigger. Now, do I need that many? No. And probably, I would be the first to say, probably 8,000 or 10,000 of those are not really relevant to what I'm doing today. And if it didn't take so long to go in and undo all that, I would. But that would be non-productive work. I will tell you this, if you see my name and say, oh, I think it'd be great to connect with John, unless you're somebody that fits a certain profile that I'm looking for, in other words, somebody who's an executive and who may need my services going forward, I've got to pay the bills too, then I'm probably not going to accept a connection from you. Why? Because a lot of people, that as soon as they connect with you and you accept, they want to start selling you stuff. A lot of it is crap that doesn't work when you see it on TV or when you get it home. And so I'm tired of that. And so I don't do that anymore because that doesn't meet my needs. It doesn't help me accomplish my goals. It doesn't help me achieve my metrics. So when you start out networking, have a plan and understand what kind of people do I need to put in my network that'll help me achieve my goals. That's really important. If you don't do that, you're not going to be successful. So Dunbar rule, 135 to 150. Self's rule is just do it. Okay, no excuses. 5-second rule, get it done every week, every day. Do something every day to advance your brand on LinkedIn, to advance your connections. Post things that add value to your network. Always make it very clear that you're there to help them too. Now, let's shift over to building relationships. A personal note with a connection request. When you ask somebody to connect with you, send them a personal note, okay? Here's who I am, and I'm really interested. I think you're targeted. I like your organization. I've liked what I've read about it, and I just wanted to connect with some people there. If anything ever came up, that's a place I'd be honored to be considered for employment. Well, that's especially if you're reaching out to people at your level. That may or may not elicit a response. But you're looking for HR people, you're looking for recruiters, you're looking for people with your specialized skill or your area of expertise. And you might want to even get some lower level people because sometimes, if you call and you were a former senior vice president with a company and you kind of let that out, a lower level person may tell you more information because they're impressed that somebody from on high would talk to them. So it's all about just being strategic. It's all about being savvy to get to where you need to be. Look for common people you connect with. Look for common interests. Same fraternity. Maybe you're connected with 5 or 6 other people they're connected with. Always try to point that out as you move forward. Do not ask for a job on the first connection. Say, and always end it by saying, please let me know if I can help you. I've got some extra time right now, and it would be I'd be honored to help you if I can. Always say that. One of my clients today, just one of the greatest guys I've ever worked with. I won't give his name because I don't want to draw extra attention, but he's a physician, an Italian, single guy, Catholic, gets up and goes to mass every day. He's old school, but he is a joy to be with. He really is a joy to be with. And, his whole demeanor is, it has to get done. And we're talking about look for people with common interest. And he has a lot of friends, and he's now beginning to kind of connect with those people because they're the people that can help. And when you start connecting with people, always send that note and then have a plan for follow-up. When and what are you going to follow up about? Plant stuff in this, do post every day. Maybe it's a news story to say, this is a significant issue. This is going to be an issue that we have to deal with in our industry. Here's my take on it, but I'd appreciate hearing from you. Okay? That's the way you look to engage people. You're not trying to impress them. You're not trying to pontificate. That's one of my biggest problems is sometimes I'm the old journalist and I'm about reporting what you need to know. And that's sometimes not very successful in networking. So try to help people, post people with things that you think that would add value and not be the guy that wants to just, give the bad news. Now I'm somebody who says, yeah, there's a lot of bad news out there right now. In a couple of my posts, people said, God, that was a buzzkill. But you know what I say? I don't see it that way. When there is many problems we have in the market or in an industry, that's opportunity for the people who are prepared, who are focused, who have a plan, and who can execute. So networking, gosh, we talk about this all the time. It is the essential career management activity, and it'll be critical going forward. If you don't do it, you're going to find yourself increasingly pushed out of the market. And I just can't drill that in enough. And we go back one slide to really highlight some other things. Career plan, you got to have it. You got to do the networking. Absolutely. I get calls and questions about that all the time. Usually people trying to find another way around that because that makes them uncomfortable. You got to build relationships. You can't just connect with somebody and let it go. You got to build relationships. And you have to have commercialization of what you're doing. Leverage your contacts, look for opportunities, be creative, and always try to help the other person. The doctor I was talking to this morning, he worked for an organization that when people call, you'd introduce yourself on the phone. How can I help you? I have some time. That was just a standard part of their answer, the telephone answer. And when they were getting ready to wrap up the conversation, is there anything I can do for you? I have some time. And even if you didn't, that was part of their culture. And people that weren't used to that were always so impressed. So that is something when you're networking, you got to come up with, you got to be authentic, but those are some things you want to think about. Again, I can't emphasize networking and the importance enough. 70% of all the jobs, 70% of all the good jobs are not posted on job boards or publicly. They're filled by referral or recruiters. Now, recruiters are increasingly using, and corporations are increasingly using high-speed scanners on platforms like LinkedIn, and they're scanning these profiles based on an algorithm that they created for a specific job. If you have a vibrant, robust LinkedIn profile, then you have a good chance for gaining consideration. If you haven't put anything on your profile in 6 months or a year, you're probably not. So whether you like it or not, LinkedIn is now a valuable tool. It's a networking research tool. You're not going to necessarily build a relationship on LinkedIn, but it's a tool to help you build a relationship. So I hope that you'll consider that. If you have questions about that, I've been networking most of my adult life. I was a reporter, always looking for sources to help me with stories. As a business developer, I was always looking to people who I could leverage their knowledge and leverage their standing to get to where I needed to be. I enjoy it because I've met some of the most interesting people in the world. And I don't approach it with me, 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 me. I approach it as I'm just, I'm out here, trying to understand something. Do you have a few minutes you can kind of help me explain the relationships here? It fascinates me, and and this is confidential, and I just don't want to say anything that might ruffle anybody's feathers or create a kind of people are genuinely willing to help you if they trust you. So you need to be authentic. You need to be straightforward with what you're trying to do. And you need to take it as, hey, I'll help you. And this is a learning experience. And I've met some of the great friends I have today, I've met through networking. It all comes down to conversion, though. In conversion from your plan to your network, networking 3.0, to action, taking action, to reaching out to people, to really visualizing what you've thought about and taking action on that, and then converting that into opportunity, new business, a new job, any of those things. It's what it's all about. Thank you guys for staying with us today. And I promise you, if it hair lips the Holy Father, we will get rid of all these technological bugs. I used another platform for almost a year and was very used to it, but it didn't have some of the features I was looking for. And so I've gone back, changed to Restream, which is I think it's a New York company, and they have a really good platform and gives me more flexibility. But I wasn't born with technology in my crib, so sometimes just using it, every time I use it, I learn more. And so thank you for your patience. We will see you. I'll be on tomorrow at noon, Career Live. We're on Instagram tomorrow at noon. We'll be answering some questions and talking about some other things that are going on in the job market and trying to provide strategic tips to help you move forward. Thank you very much. And we'll see you tomorrow at noon if you have time, or we'll see you next Tuesday at noon.